There are no signs tonight that President Biden is thinking about dropping out of the presidential race. This evening, the president campaigned in Michigan, a must-win battleground state. Campaign stop comes at a time when nearly 24 Democratic lawmakers are asking him to step aside. More than a dozen. They're asking him to do that because of his age, his messaging abilities. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries says that he met with the president last night. In a letter this morning to congressional Democrats, Jeffries stopped short of fully endorsing the president's campaign, but tonight the president poked fun at his own age.
I know I look 40 years old, but I'm a little bit older. Hopefully with age comes a little wisdom. And here's what I know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. I know how, and I've demonstrated how to do this job. And I know Americans want a president, not a dictator.
The president argued that his opponent, Republican Donald Trump, is a convicted felon who has, as he put it, gotten a free pass.
So joining us now to talk a little bit more about this, the presidential race, and so much more from this week is a host of the WGN Political Report, Paul Lisnek. Always nice to see you,
Gonna get
sir.
busy every Friday.
Oh, my. Okay, so I want to ask you this, because at some point you got to question, how long does this go on? Because if he decides not to step aside, at some point they have to try and support him, right?
Yeah. So there's the real answer and there's the practical answer. The real answer is they have until August 7th. Why? Because Ohio has this law that requires his name to be on the ballot by August 7th. It's just something that they did. Might be August 6th. And if he's not on there, then technically he's not allowed on the ballot in Ohio. Now, Ohio's legislature, through pushing of the governor, modified it. Okay, we'll put him on, whatever. But the administration's not going to take that chance. Well, you could go to court and fight. You might, and then you might not have the court support you. So the bottom line is August 6th or 7th is the date his name must be put into nomination. They'll do it by Zoom to get his name on the Ohio ballot. Now, prior to that, realistically speaking or practically, they need to do this in the next week or so, because beyond that, if he drops out, if there's a new person at the top of the ticket, they need time. Yeah. And right now there's threats of money being pulled. $90 million was threatened today from one group to say we're not going to give it to the campaign and we're not going to give it to Senate or Congress either.
Assuming that doesn't happen, and we talked about this last night, can Biden make enough appearances like he did last night, where he talked cogently about domestic and foreign affairs, and then today in Michigan? Can he do that to a point where, he convinces enough people, or is he on a path to lose to Donald Trump?
It's a good question, Ray. Look, he was strong tonight. I mean, I watched his presentation in Michigan. He was strong. He was on prompter. And he was doing the kind of things you almost wish that if you're a Democrat, where was he 2 months ago to do, going after Trump, just doing all the things a Democratic nominee should be doing.
But if he keeps doing that, will that make
is that
a change?
enough?
So the answer to the question is, when he's on prompter and doing strong, had he started that months ago, we might not be in this situation. But because we have the debate, which you can't unsee in your mind, that even though he'll have more of these scripted, handled well events, the issue is it's those press conferences. We talked last night on the air about some of the goofs that got made. The thing is, it's all anybody's watching with him. Will he goof? Will he, we're not, and that's the problem. As long as the focus is on him, that is a win for Trump. The whole idea is, in this particular race, put the focus on the other guy. And Trump has just stayed out of the fray for the last couple of weeks, because they say when your opponent's drowning, just stay out of the water.
Right.
And that's what Trump has been doing.
So it's like anytime he makes a mistake, it becomes monumental, right?
And we watch for it. Look, I watched tonight. What will happen? That's what people.
Right.
We shouldn't be watching for that purpose, but that is where we are right now.
So, okay, if they campaign moving forward and they keep him as a Democratic nominee, do they change their approach? Is there the possibility that perhaps he may not do the September debate? How do they handle that?
So, if he decides to stay, and then you'll see all these people who have said he's got to go, they're going to have to turn around. They really don't have a choice, right? So they'll ultimately get behind it. And by the way, there's nobody who's disliking him and saying step out. Every one of them. It takes the position of we love him. He's one of the best 10 presidents ever, but. And it's always followed by the but. As far as the debate, I personally would be pretty surprised if there's a September
pulls out of
debate.
that, right.
You know what? No, if he actually proceeds with the debate. Because, look, I mean, I think what happened a couple of weeks ago, to me, it was a cognitive incident. He had a bad night. No, Obama had a bad night when he had that first debate against Mitt Romney. He didn't prepare, thought he could handle it. Romney didn't bother him. That's a bad night. This was more than that. I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't know what it's all about, but I would be concerned for him to proceed with the debate in September.
All we hear are these calls right now, but I want to counter the other side because tonight, Democratic Senator John Fetterman said that Biden can and will win, in his opinion, win Pennsylvania. He also talked about that's all he hears from constituents when, we hear from others like, Mike Quigley, Brad Schneider. Is that all of his constituents are saying we need you to drop out. Right. Fetterman, I mean, how strong are those voices going to be as we get closer to next month here in Chicago for the DNC?
Well, right, Fetterman's been behind him since this all started. Remember, Fetterman himself had a stroke during the campaign, so he's a living example of somebody who says this can be overcome. And look, senators should speak for their constituents. That's fine. There's no reason not to. But the issue is, to me, while everybody's looking at did another congressman come out? Is it another congressman? Yeah, pay attention. Look, right now it's about 20 or so out of over 200. So there's still lots to go. In talking to one member of Congress, my understanding is there are more to come. But the bigger problem is the money. And it's also my understanding there were some fundraisers that were to be held here in Illinois this weekend, and they have been canceled. So it's really about, to me, the money. If the money begins to dry up, that really puts the pressure on Biden.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi and former President Barack Obama are having close consultations. I don't know that they have met with President Biden, but what kind of influence do you presume they might have?
So the people that will have the greatest influence on President Biden are going to be his family, his wife, his son, his sister, Val. Those are the people who are our key influencers. Ron Klain, people who are close advisors. The thing with Obama, here's the problem he has, which is he's the one that basically said no to him back in 2015 when Obama wanted to get behind Hillary Clinton. So the question is, can Obama do that twice? I said no then. I want to say no now. I mean, Obama is who he is and has that kind of panache to deal with him. But I'm not so sure whether or not Biden will listen to him.
I want to switch gears for a second and talk about the RNC, which is coming up this week. VP nomination for Trump. You've got a few names out there that are floating around. Anyone you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, we can talk about all. There's three of them. There's Doug Burgum, there's J.D. Vance, and there's Marco Rubio. Rubio would have to move from Florida to make it happen, just the way the rules will require it. To be honest, my money's on J.D. Vance right now. Worst situation, I'm wrong. But that seems to be where things. The worst thing that Vance has going for him from the Trump perspective is he has facial hair. Really, that's the worst thing he's got going. Trump does not like facial hair. So if Vance shows up without a beard on Monday, we'll know something is up. I just don't see Burgum doing it. I know there's a lot of talk about him. I don't see it. I see most of the effort being, and then people are saying, oh, he'll surprise people with Tim Scott. Listen, Trump's always up for a surprise. But I think if you're in Vegas and you're betting on this, it's pretty tough not to go with J.D. Vance.
Ray, make sure you shave on Monday when you go to
If you want that now, you're going to be there.
Big important. Night. Talk to us about your show
very quickly. On Sunday morning, I'm going to be joined by former House Minority Republican leader Jim Durkin. He's going to be talking about the state of the Republican Party in Illinois. Political consultant Richard Gordon will take the Democratic perspective, and Marquette professor Charles Franklin, who's done some polls in Wisconsin about those voters, very critical to Biden. We'll talk about those results and the trends that he sees.
Sunday morning.
All that Sunday at 9.
Paul Lisnick, thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.
And you will be at the RNC come
all
Monday.
Week long.
All right.
Live coverage.
Bring me something. Toys.
I'll find you soon.
Thank you, Paul.